Okay, I'm going to start recording us, and I figure folks will join us. So welcome, everybody. I'm really excited about this presentation today. I think, hopefully it will be some new information, and it's information that you can actually use in your communities. So we're going to hear from Tom. So Tom Llewellyn, who is the Strategic Partnerships Director at Shareable.net. And he's a lifelong sharer, commoner, and storyteller, and an active consultant for community, municipal, and international initiatives, and has coordinated the global Sharing Cities Network, Map Jam, and other community sharing campaigns. He's going to talk about the shareable work and discuss and describe their available resources, and tell the story of the sharing economy, specifically focusing on local and global examples of projects, initiatives, and city policies, which could be replicated in your communities. And just lastly, Shareable is a nonprofit media outlet and action network that empowers people to share for a more resilient, equitable, and joyful world. I love that. And they inspire social change by publishing stories, analysis, and tools in collaboration with their global partners. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. You stole the words right out of my mouth, which means I can kind of get rolling a little faster, which is great. Well, thank you all for having me. I'm really happy to join you. And I'm gonna share my screen, and I've got a little presentation I'm gonna run through. And at the end, if you have any questions along the way, we can pause right there, and otherwise. Hopefully, if all goes well and I do not drag on too long, we'll have some time for discussion at the end. And I'm also happy to follow up afterwards if there's any questions that come up for you later. So, here we go. So yeah, so I'm just going to start a little bit about my own personal story, and then kind of run into how I got to Shareable and a little bit about our work. So I'm from a small village in the woods behind Oakland, California, of about 225 people out there. And I was fortunate to grow up in a very communal way. It's an unincorporated part of Contra Costa County. And as a result, we kind of took on the maintenance of all of our public utilities, which are kind of communal utilities. And so we manage and maintain our own roads and our own water systems, and set up our own internet network when they went around high-speed internet to the community. We have our own community governance system. And so as a child, I was out there, at 10 years old, I was saving my funky shoes because I knew that paving day was going to be coming. And at 10 years old, I was out there with the asphalt rake and with everybody else in the community. And it gave me a pretty good understanding of what it takes to maintain infrastructure, like what goes into it. And as a result, I got a strong appreciation for that, but also an appreciation for community and for those, kind of core communal fibers and what it takes to really create that and maintain that. One of the projects that we're working on in my community now, and I still live out there, at least part-time, is as a result of all the fires in Northern California, we've gotten more serious about our kind of mitigation and reducing of fire load. And so one day a month, we've been going to we're kind of broken into sectors in our community. And so one day per month for the last 6 months, we have all come out as a community. Probably there's about 225 people who live there. Sometimes as many as 50 people are showing up to these work days to clear brush and to kind of clear access roads and escape routes and everything. And a number of people in the community kind of have scoffed at the work because, you know, they think, well, you know, if the fire comes through, it's not going to matter. You know, maybe you're going to buy 2 minutes to escape. And to that I say, well, maybe we're going to buy 2 minutes to escape. And at the same time, it's the process that I think is really important. You know, the fact that we have these 50 people from the community, you know, representatives from almost every family coming out and working shoulder to shoulder on a shared goal. It's really strengthening that community fiber and it's setting up the relationships and the systems that will be necessary, one, for when a crisis arises, and to make sure everybody gets out and people get a better idea of you know, who's invalid and who's not and who needs support. But also when it's time to rebuild, when it's time to come back, there is a community that's there to do those communal barn raisings. And so in that sense, that process can be even more important than the product. You know, the fact that we're doing that work now is more meaningful than just the Scotch broom and dead brush that we're clearing. And, you know, that's where that kind of communal indebtedness comes. Like that's where, you know, showing up for one's neighbor and building those relationships become really important. It's not when you don't need them. It's important to have them there when you do need them. And this kind of work has kind of propelled me, you know, into the various projects that I've worked on for the last many years. I ran a project called the Sustainable Living Roadshow, educating all around all aspects of sustainability across the country for about 5 years with a group of 26 people. And that then led me to co-found a community center in Oakland, California called a Place for Sustainable Living that contains a number of the various projects or similar projects to ones that I'm going to be talking about today and others as well. And then that's what got me to Shareable. And as Sue said, Shareable is a nonprofit media outlet and action network. And we've been around since about 2009. We publish stories and on kind of a full gamut of sharing, you know, things around seed libraries and various food and cryptocurrencies and the ways that cities are kind of shifting their policies and, you know, things like tool libraries and time banks and so many things that I'm going to talk about today as well. And so we've been kind of came on and were probably the primary news outlet at first covering this kind of this type of solutionary journalism, like looking at the sharing economy and how it can benefit communities. And since we kind of got that rolling now, a number of other major news outlets have jumped on board and are covering it as well. But we were one of the torchbearers for this movement. And moving from the magazine, we started doing a lot more community engagement. And in 2012, or it was end of 2011, we hosted the first Sharing Cities conference, which launched an international Sharing Cities movement and put out the first policy guide, Policies for Shareable Cities, in partnership with another organization based here in Oakland called Sustainable Economies Law Center, which is a really great resource. Again, that's, Sustainable Economies Law Center. And started the Sharing Cities Network. And to do that, we put the word out and invited a lot of people to join, but one of the first projects that got us going was doing community asset mapping. And we did a large scale map jam. And in 2013, our goal was to get, about 10 to 20 cities to all participate in a 2-week campaign to do the community asset mapping. And over 50 cities jumped on board with only about a month notice. And that campaign has continued. And so far we've worked with groups in over 100 cities to map out their community assets. And we have on Shareable, we have guides that shows people how to do it and do it in a fun and engaging way. So I can, at the end of this email, I'm going to send a group of resources to Sue that can be shared out. And that would be one of them. And from there, once the mapping was the first round of mapping was done, we went back to that community again and invited them to host large scale sharing events and to pull together the resources that were put on those maps. And so again, we had kind of what we thought to be, and this is actually when I first got to Shareable, when I was first hired, because I'd worked as a volunteer before. When I was brought on as a contractor, I was told that, you know, they wanted me to get 10 of these share fests, you know, going back out to everyone done the mapping and try and get 10. And, you know, I had to get 5 if I wanted to get any more work moving forward. And if I got 20, it would be knocking the ball out of the park. And again, we had about 40 share fests over the course of a month. And a lot of those groups who started at that point in time have rehosted their share fests every year. And again, we've got all kinds of resources for how to put on a share fest and kind of pull all these things together. So it's our work has been to kind of catalyze these various initiatives, and then we oftentimes get out of the way and we let the groups take them on and alter them and change them and fit them to what makes sense for their community. No one size fits all. And you know, this kind of work is really rooted in the commons, you know, and the commons is known as a group of people, a resource, and a governance system to manage that resource. And you know, these can be digital commons like Wikipedia. They can be physical commons like there's about 2 billion people who gain their sustenance around the world from commonly managed resources, be it fisheries or forests and grazing lands, where those relationships are being done by kind of managed by the communities themselves rather than any kind of government management system. And you know, and then also there's now these kind of moving into the urban commons, and that's where our work with Sharing Cities really comes to pass. And with the Sharing Cities, we feel like it's kind of this equal mix between the government, the market, and the commons. And in the United States, we don't really have a strong understanding of the commons or a strong commons sector. It's in other countries around the world is much stronger, where it is almost equally, in some places, still pretty well balanced between the government and the market. And so that's kind of that rebalancing is what we push for, and really feel like that place where they all come together is where that sharing city is possible. And you know, I mentioned that we started the first Sharing Cities conference in 2011 that led to a Sharing Cities working group in San Francisco, which was the first one in the country that we were a part of. And the city of Seoul, South Korea got really excited about that. They had a new mayor coming in and who was inheriting a city that had some of the worst air pollution in the world, one of the highest suicide rates in the world, you know, some of the lowest quality of life. And so Mayor Park looked at this sharing as being one tool in the toolbox for kind of redirecting the city. And as a result of Seoul getting behind this, and we've been working with them since the beginning of the program as well, a lot of other cities around the world have jumped on. And now there's about over 40 cities in the world that have a Sharing Cities program of one kind or another. Amsterdam being the first sharing city in Europe. There's now a whole network of the main cities in Sweden have all networked together for Sharing Cities Sweden and are collaborating together. Again, with the Sharing Economy Association of Japan is also networking with multiple cities across Japan. And it's become a global movement. And partially as a result of this work I mentioned with Mayor Park in Seoul, 2 years ago, the mayor received the Gothenburg Sustainable Development Award, in part for his work around his Sharing Cities work. So it's begun to get more kind of internationally recognized. And this led us to create, we heard a need both from the cities that we were working with on a policy level and also the community organizers that we were working with through the Sharing Cities network for a better kind of guide and explanation of really what the Sharing Cities were and better examples and theory and principles for what they could be. And so we spent 2 years working on this book, Sharing Cities, Activating the Urban Commons, with a group of about 15 fellows from 9 different countries. We crowdsourced the number of the case studies and the policies, and and about 17 organizations contributed pieces to it as well. And all in all, there's 137 different case studies and city policies drawn from over 80 cities in 35 countries. And so this is the book right here. We just released it a few months ago, and we've put the PDF of it up available for free. So anybody can download and share the PDF. And I'm going to go through a number of the kind of case studies and policies that we included in the book as we move forward. But as you can see, it's kind of follows these 11 core city sectors of housing, mobility, food, work, energy, land, waste, water, technology, finance, and governance. And we got to these 11 core city sectors in part through a pretty intensive research project with the fellows, and we did about 50 different interviews with academics, policymakers, community organizers from all over the world to kind of really focus in on what the core of the book should be. And again, this is the distribution of all the case studies. And there's actually, after we released this, I realized that there was quite a few that we missed the dots on in Egypt and other places, a few are in Africa. But it's got a pretty good distribution. And the whole book has been put out under a Creative Commons license. And so which if you're not familiar, a Creative Commons license is similar to a copyright, except you can designate how open or how usable or reusable you want the materials to be. So in our case, we have a Creative Commons license on all of our work that allows anybody to reproduce any part of our work, even for commercial purposes, as long as they give credit and link back to the original source. And so we've done that with the book as well. And we've made it so that anybody can take the pieces, they can put them in their own local community guides or their own resources. And there's actually groups in 4 countries right now that are currently translating the book. And when they're done translating, they will actually be able to, because we've given them the design files and all the photos and everything, they're going to be able to sell the books in their own home countries. And the one in Japan, for example, they are reproducing about 2/3 of the book, and then instead of the final third, they are collecting a lot of Japanese specific case studies and city policies to make it more relevant to their audience. So it really, our work is to empower others to do their work. And we've been fortunate enough to be able to kind of give these resources away and offer this support. So I just want to get kind of started with some of these examples and things that I think might be useful in your communities. And I'm going to go through relatively quickly. I've got about 12 examples that I want to go through. But if there's anything you've got any deep questions about, feel free to ask. And again, I believe almost if all of them, if most, if not all of these examples are in the book as well, in which they get fleshed out. And again, I'll make sure that you get the link to the PDF for that. So the first one I wanted to present is out of Ireland, and it's called Food Cloud. And this is a project that it's an app, and it bridges food waste from the supermarket to consumers that are unable to afford food otherwise. And there's a long-running issue with food banks where oftentimes they are getting food that they don't need or don't have the resources to be able to go and pick up food. And the way that Food Cloud works is that supermarkets and in the UK, Tesco, which is I think the largest supermarket chain, is participating, and others are jumping on board as well. So at any Tesco, the manager or the produce manager is able to take pictures of what's going to be thrown out, of what's getting close to a spoilage point, and is able to kind of say how many pounds or exactly kilograms, whatever, of that produce, and put it up on the app. And it goes out to all these food banks that have said that they are interested in participating. And then the food banks are able to claim that food. And so they know what's coming and they can say whether they want it or not. And then there's a group of volunteers which have opted in to pick up and drop off the food. And so an alert, once a food bank claims the food, they're able to send out an alert, goes automatically to those that have volunteered, that have opted in to be volunteers, and then one of those volunteers can claim the pickup if they say they're available. And so it's able to kind of seamlessly kind of move food that would be wasted into a place where it can be utilized. And they've already, just in the last few years, had an incredible success. You can see in the picture. These numbers are from last year, so it's even gone up since then. And I think this is within the first 5 years of the program. They've been able to redistribute that much food just across the UK. Incredible Edible Todmorden. And again, I'm just going to stick on the food kick for a minute. And this project is about 10 years old. And there was a woman moved into town and was redoing her front yard. And she said instead she decided to tear down the fence and to open up her yard to grow food, and planted a big garden and put out a sign that said "Food to share." Take what you need. And it inspired the city to get on board. And there are the police department, the fire department, the public libraries, the municipal buildings, the neighbors, all of them throughout Todmorden have began to put out public front yard food boxes and gardens and all that sort of thing. And now 10 years on, there are about 100 chapters of Incredible Edible across the UK. And so it's gone very, very quickly and provided public food and access to food in a very non-stigmatized way. And also it's very low tech, and I mean there's different groups that come together and support each other with gardening projects, and there's seed swaps, and there's a lot of other kind of community building aspects of the project beyond just the putting the food out in the front yards. And it's low tech, and that's one of the things that I really like about this project and many of the projects that we feature here, is that they don't require a lot of technical apps or any supports, or it's one of those things that you can with relatively low input get a pretty considerable output. Next project I'd like to talk about is 596 acres. And I was talking about the Incredible Edible, but sometimes you don't always have the access to land, especially in big urban areas. And so this group in New York a few years ago, there was a couple of community organizers, and there was an open lot in their neighborhood, and they wanted to know who owned it. There had been nothing built there. There was a fence across it, and it had been like that for a number of years. And so they started doing some research, and they found out that it was owned by the city. And not only was that lot owned by the city of New York, but there was 596 acres throughout New York City that were public land. And so they created a mapping platform, which is an open source mapping platform, and started to map out all of those lots. And then what they would do is they created a sign, "This land is your land," with information about it. And they went around to the various lots and put those out there and let people know, hey, if you're interested in doing something with this place in your community, get in touch. They didn't. They made sure that it was community driven, that they would offer support, but they weren't going to go about deciding which lots got turned into what. And so there's already I think a couple of hundred of these lots have been turned into community spaces. Some of them community gardens or little micro parks and meeting spaces and all that sort of thing. Again, just within the last 10 years. And this project has been replicated in Philadelphia, and I think there's at least 10 cities now that have replicated this. And again, like I said, this mapping platform, all their tools are all open source. and can be found at 596 acres.
Tom, that's amazing. So I was just going to ask you about the mapping. So it's on their website. If you go to,
it's on their website, and it's available to download. Yeah, so they're
okay.
596acres.org.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, and then they've got a link to it, but and I've got the link in the book as well. If there's a link in the PDF, but the open source mapping tool is available on GitHub to be able to download,
okay.
and so that link is also in the PDF of the book.
Great, thank you.
Yep. And then another one is tool libraries, and this is really just libraries of things. There's been a major resurgence of libraries globally, where they have kind of really started to reinvent themselves and look at the various services and products that they can be offering. Many of which have started to build out co-working spaces and mobile office, office space, and there's kitchen libraries now. Like in the city of Portland, where you can check out all kinds of different kitchen stuff that you only use every once in a while, various nice blenders and canning supplies and, all that sort of thing. And then tool libraries. And this is a tool library that I'm a co-founder of. I started in Asheville, North Carolina. Took us about 3 years to get the funding and find the right space. And now it's been up and running for the last 2 years, and we just got a new space. I say we, I'm not all that involved anymore because I've moved back to the Bay Area, but we've now just gotten to a much larger space. And there's about 100 of these tool libraries across the country. The first one started in 1978 in Cleveland, Ohio. The longest running tool library in the country is in Berkeley, California. There's also one here in Oakland. And many of them, like the one here in Asheville, are run as independent nonprofits. But some, like both Oakland and Berkeley, are run through the municipal library system, which means that anybody who has a library card has access to an unimaginable number of tools. I mean, thousands of tools at these libraries. And it's kind of their benefit is manyfold. I mean, from one, it's the reduction of waste. The average power drill is used about 11 minutes in its entire lifetime. The saying is, you don't need a drill, you need a hole in the wall. And so, these tool libraries, they are reducing an incredible amount of waste and they get a lot of use. I mean, the one in Oakland has, I think it was about 25 weed whackers, 12 hedge trimmers, just as an example, not to mention how many hammers and screwdrivers and plumbing tools and all sorts of things. And, a lot of people use it to work on their projects. It's become, as we have less and less space, it makes a lot more sense. But others use it as a way of economic development and upward mobility in that sense. They afford people to start micro businesses, doing yard work, doing construction work, in a way that would not be possible if with having to put the investment into those tools themselves. And so many people are starting businesses and using these tools, and then once they get established, it makes a lot more sense to get the tools themselves. But in the beginning, it can be make or break for whether or not someone is going to be able to create a successful business in one of these sectors. And so we've definitely found that in Asheville, and it's the reason why there's 25 weed whackers at the Oakland Tool Library,
And Tom, is that at no cost? So you have a card and you can
go. So in the municipal library systems, it's at no cost. So in Oakland and Berkeley, you don't pay any money at all to check the tools out. But at many of the tool libraries, so let's say the Asheville Tool Library, we have a sliding scale membership, give away a number of hardship memberships as well. But the sliding scale is between $20 and $100 annually.
Oh, wow.
And then once you pay that, most people are paying around $50 annually. Once you pay that fee, then you have an unlimited access to tools.
Mhm.
And I mean, power drills and jackhammers and all sorts of things that, you know, if you went to a rental, a tool rental space, you might pay that in a one-day rental
Yeah.
just for one or two tools. And yet you get access because it's a shared communal resource. And there's also amazing community that's built around this. You know, oftentimes tool libraries host workshops on how to use the tools. They're doing that kind of educational work and teaching people how to do it safely. Tool maintenance, teaching people how to maintain the tools that they have. You know, there's community work days. A number of tool libraries support local nonprofits, and when nonprofits have community work days, they're able to come and get the tools from the tool library. And so it can be really mutually supportive within a community. And again, there's now about 100 of these and across the US alone that are formalized. And this has really been made possible by the technology there. There's a great platform which is run by, in full disclosure, one of our sponsors. MyTurn has a great lending library software. For MyTurn, they've got for all different things, but they've got one specifically for tool libraries called Local Tools. And it's something that I used with the Asheville Tool Library before I came to Shareable. So I'll just give you that. You know, they are a sponsor and they're awesome. And they're really the best. And the majority of tool libraries across the United States use their software at this point in time. They allow groups to start using the software at no cost. And then as they build up their membership, then there's a fee that kicks in. But they really have been there and a key part of growing this movement. And, you know, beyond the taking the tools away, there's a new kind of global Fab Lab movement. And it's really taken off in the past few years. In the city of Barcelona, every single district has a Fab Lab. In the community center that I co-founded in North Oakland, there we have a Fab Lab. We started that in 2011. And now the Asheville Tool Library is going to be adding one in as well as they move into their new space. And so it allows people to access the tools, much larger tools that you couldn't take out, you know, CNC machines and 3D printers and drill presses and, you know, all kinds of huge bandsaws and technical electronic tools, all sorts of things. Allows access to that. And so these are, again, typically places with a monthly or annual membership fee. And they encourage collaboration and there's oftentimes various design challenges and groups working from doing kind of cross-cultural collaborations, working on projects remotely in one country or another. And it's localizing production and allowing people to create prototypes and do all sorts of things that normally would have cost a lot of money, but now can be done for, you know, basically a zero marginal cost. And it's kind of, they work kind of hand in hand with the tool library concept. And again, it's one of those things that is allowing for a lot of local economic development. It's able to kind of really bring back production into communities without having to put in huge factories. And it can be an incubator to be able to build out new and larger businesses. And, you know, one great kind of example of something that came out of one of those is the compost peddlers. And there's now multiple businesses of this kind across the country. The Rust Belt Riders in Ohio being another one, where people have taken the opportunity where there are not municipal composting programs to create private ones, linking working with businesses and residential, but then also with farms and community gardens. And so this one is again, like I said, compost peddlers, and they are with the bike, they're able to transport an incredible amount of food, or you know, what would be otherwise waste, just on their bike with zero you know, emissions and all that sort of thing. And so far, I guess the bikes can carry up from 500 to 800 pounds of food waste on those. And as of last year, they had 600 residential members and 30 commercial members, and had already turned over 700,000 pounds of organic waste into compost, with kind of a low cost of about $30 per month or $16 per month for residential members, and commercial members paying more than that. And so again, they've been able to create a business. They've been able to fill a gap in a city, and also it can be used as a way to prove that there is a market or a desire for a compost program. Evergreen Cooperatives. And again, they're a network in Cleveland, Ohio of worker-owned cooperatives, which means that everybody in the business who is a worker is also an owner and has a vote in the way that decisions are made. Currently, this network of cooperatives in Ohio, in Cleveland, has about 100 employees, and with the annual revenue of $6 million. And they have these 4 different businesses around their solar cooperative. They have a cooperative laundry. They have a farm group, and the way that they've been able to be successful is that they have worked with the city to be prioritized for kind of key contracts. So they're able to get contracts from the hospital, from the city, from universities, that sort of thing. There's kind of large stakeholders in the community, and as a result of being a worker-owned cooperative, everybody who works there gets a vote in decision making. Typically, that's a vote to elect their board of directors. It's not something that every worker is making a vote on every single decision, but they get to choose who does get to make the decisions. And also, because the business is owned by everybody locally, more money stays within the community, and they're able to, and because of their structure as being a worker-owned cooperative, they're able to decide about investing money into the business and raising wages and that sort of thing. There isn't money that's being siphoned off into shareholders. And this kind of long-standing history of worker-owned cooperatives has now started to transition into the digital space. And as we're seeing kind of new large digital platforms, like communications platforms like Twitter and Facebook, and housing platforms like Airbnb, and mobility and ride-hailing platforms like Uber and Lyft, there is a movement to kind of retake back the ownership of these platforms, and to make sure that the people that are providing the value on them are being compensated for the value that they're creating, and that have a stake in the governance and the management of those resources. And so there's a number of different examples. Stocksy, which is another one of our sponsors, they are a stock photography cooperative, like Getty Images, that is owned by all the photographers. There's a kind of a on-demand workforce platform called Localnomics. It's similar to TaskRabbit. It's based here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And there's another great example up in Vancouver that I just want to touch on for a moment, called Moto Car Share. And they've been around for 20 years. And so they're just like, I'm just having a mind slip. Excuse me. I mean, so they're a car share. They're just like, you'd be able to hire get a car. It's on the street, and the main company of it, City Car Share is one. The main company around the world, I'm just blanking on right now. Excuse me. But so it's an on-demand kind of thing. And it started 20 years ago with about 15 people, 2 cars. And in the last 20 years, they've now expanded. They've got about 700 cars, trucks, vans, sports cars, all sorts of things, and about 20,000 members. And as a result of it being a cooperative and owned by the members of the program, everybody takes a really good care of their cars in a way that some of these other platforms is not the case.
Let me ask you,
Because they know that their rates are going to go up if they don't maintain them. They know that they're going to get that same car again. And with other rideshare programs, it's not quite the same thing. And so as a result, Moto has gotten an A rating from the Better Business Bureau, whereas many like the leading car share company had a D.
let me just turn off this.
And so this shows that, and one of the reasons is not only are they taking care of that resource, but they're also participating in the governance of that, and so they have a stronger connection. I think that governance part is really important, and that governance part also comes to how we interact with our community spaces. This is a picture from Portland, and it's intersection repair, and city repair has been around for about 20 years now. And every year they have a village building convergence where people come from all over the place to do placemaking work, like this intersection repair here to kind of create public commons, put in community gardens, build tiny houses for the houseless, paint intersections like this, put up benches and tea houses and playhouses on the corners, message boards and little free libraries. And it's been around for about 20 years, and it got its start from really kind of unfortunate circumstances. There was two little girls that were in a small neighborhood. They were crossing the street to go to the park in a place that the community had been advocating to get a stop sign for a long time, but the city had not provided one. And as these two little girls were crossing the street, they were run over by a car and they were killed. And the community was understandably really upset, and they were trying to figure out how to make this not happen again. And again, they had been advocating for this stop sign for a long time to no avail. And so they threw a kind of a block party and they shut down the street in commemoration of these girls that had passed. And while they did that, they had the permit to shut down the street, but they didn't have a permit to paint the intersection. And they painted a mural much like this one. And afterwards, the city came and power washed it away. They said that you couldn't do this, And so there was a big city council meeting that followed. There was a whole kind of uproar from the community. And at that meeting, one of the city council members now infamously said that the streets belong to everybody, which means that nobody can use them. The streets belong to everybody, which means that nobody can use them. It's kind of that disconnect, And as we think about, the streets in our neighborhoods, we've become so disconnected. And one of the reasons is that we don't have kind of the public square. We don't have that community meeting place. And so, after that city council meeting, there became more pressure from the community, and they overturned it, and they started to allow groups to do it. And now 70 intersections have been painted like this across Portland in the last 20 years. I was able to be at the city repair in 2012 and paint an intersection like this, and worked on a few other projects there. And it's incredible, having the people come out in their neighborhood. There's a process where members of the community come together for a couple of months to do the design, figure out what is culturally relevant for their community, what makes sense, what is the story they want to tell with that, and builds people together, brings people together, and then more things start to come. It's not just about the painting, but again, like I was saying, putting things like little free libraries and food distribution boxes and message boards and playhouses and tea houses and cob benches and it really takes back that space and makes it a more of a community space. And people slow down. They don't drive fast. They realize that they're going through a town square. More than just an intersection. And there's various kind of policy work that hoops you have to jump through. My understanding is that according to the Department of Transportation, the only two ways to legally slow down traffic are through traffic circles and speed bumps. And this isn't, doing intersection painting like this isn't justifiable as a way of slowing down traffic, even though it really is. But it's amazing, and it brings people into the space and really reminds people that these are public commons, and we do have a role in maintaining them, and we do have an ability to use them. And this same kind of governance idea comes into play with participatory budgeting. And there's now 1,500 cities around the world have participatory budgeting mechanisms of one kind or another. Started in Brazil in the 80s as a way of trying to get people to trust their public services after the dictatorship ended. And it's really grown from there. I mean, there's millions and millions of dollars of budgets that are given to the participatory budgeting process in Barcelona and Madrid. There's a program now in Oakland, California, and the Participatory Budgeting Association supports groups to start new projects. I mean, there's elementary schools that are now using participatory budgeting with their students. There's all different mechanisms for doing this. And when it comes to making decisions, Lumio is a really great tool to do that. It's an online app that came out from organizers that were involved in the Occupy movement and trying to figure out how to make decisions with large groups of people who didn't know each other, they didn't have connections. And after kind of trying to do that physically, they created an app. And the app allows people to form groups, to be able to put up proposals, to edit those proposals, make comments, to vote on them, and to make decisions in a very kind of quick and efficient and equitable manner. And they have all sorts of resources on how to set these up. They, again, it's one of those things where it's a kind of pay what you can model for using the source. And groups large and small are using this. Podemos, which is kind of the third largest party in Spain, uses it for all of their Podemos, use it for all of their decision making, and many other nonprofits and community networks are using it as well. Hundreds and hundreds of groups around the world are using this software, and they've really improved it over the course of the last couple of years of getting lots of feedback. And so that, if you look up lumio.org, that pops up. And once you're making those decisions, especially when you're doing them online, you have to make sure that people have internet access. And this is a project out of Germany. This is Freifunk Internet. There's Giphynet in Barcelona, and we had a very similar scheme in my community in Canyon, where it's groups kind of setting up their own internet service within a community, creating an internet mesh network with a series of responders, and provisioning internet to communities that wouldn't otherwise have access. There's another great example of that on a large scale that's just really kicking off. It's been getting up and going for the last couple of years, but called the People's Internet here in Oakland, California. And they are providing internet coverage through kind of both paid and free service across Oakland to people that wouldn't be able to access it through Comcast or other services. The system that we set up in my community, the internet provider decided that we were too rural and didn't want to set up the service. And so one of my neighbors was tech savvy and was able to get from the kind of the closest corner to where they did have service, pull from that house and set up a series of responders, much like this one, throughout our whole community. And and as a result, there wasn't money from that system going back to the ISP. But we all had internet, and so the agreement that we created was to, instead of paying this guy who'd set up the internet service for all of us, after all of his equipment was paid off, we all paid into our public school. And so so now instead of, we were all still paying, $40 or $50 for internet service, but instead of going to Comcast, we're making a monthly donation to our public school. And so the use of those services was going and directly benefiting other public services. And, you know, one of the things that I kind of just want to leave everyone with is that these things don't only have to be that complicated, you know, and I talked about the Edible Todmorden as being a great example of that. You know, there's so many ways to bring people together to kind of strengthen those community fibers, to you know, support community health. You know, repair cafes and fix-it clinics is one great example, which have really taken off. There's great how-tos. We've got how-tos on how to host one of these on Shareable. And this is one of about 100 different how-tos that we have on our site on how to start these various projects. And it's, you know, people come and bring their broken appliances, you know, other tools, what have you, and either have the tools on hand that are there to fix it yourself, or there's people there to help you fix those things, fix that toaster that doesn't necessarily need to get thrown away because one thing's off, to, you know, add a new power cord onto a tool that's been cut. Do these kind of basic things and teach people how to do it, how to do that work, so they're able to be empowered to do it later themselves. The Zero Waste Party Pack. The city of Palo Alto now has 23 of these distributed throughout the city. And anybody can check out 1, 2, or 3 of them when they're having a private party. Instead of making a whole bunch of waste with disposables, they've got these sets of plates and bowls and cups and knives and forks. And so anybody at no cost can check these out for the weekend, for the week, for an event. I've been able to utilize these, or rather we at Shareable have utilized these Zero Waste Party Packs out of Palo Alto multiple times for our events. And this is part of a larger program that they have of having they've got a zero waste program in Palo Alto. And so they have these kind of zero waste ambassadors throughout the city that are working with their local, they're basically representatives in their neighborhoods to help others in their neighborhoods reduce their waste and consumption. And many of them host these zero waste party packs. They're relatively inexpensive to create, and they get a lot of uses. Every single time I've gone to use one, I've had somebody using it right before me and right after, and so I'd have to be really careful, you know, really good about getting it back on time. They get used each one gets used hundreds of times throughout the year. And, you know, many of these things are really basic too, and this is the walking school bus. There's now hundreds, if not thousands, of these walking school buses around the world. Kind of the first one, you know, became framed in this way, although it's an old concept. Got framed as the walking school bus in Australia, and it's really spread. And you know, again, it's like I was kind of talking about at the beginning, with the fire clearing, having, you know, that it having multiple different benefits. And the walk-in school bus, it really has a lot of different benefits. On the one hand, you know, they're reducing the amount of fossil fuels and infrastructure that's necessary, not having to pay for buses. And on the other hand, you know, the kids are being able to get exercise in the morning and socialize on the way. And they're also getting to meet neighbors and kind of get an understanding for the roads, you know, but also, like, you know, the geolocation, like understanding their public infrastructure, the way that the city is set up. It kind of provides connections when you're walking on the ground that you wouldn't get otherwise, you know, getting to experience that changing in the season by walking on that same path to school every day. And so something this simple, while it's reducing the cost to the public school system, reducing the kind of environmental impact, it's also providing incredible benefits for the students themselves. And really all of these are kind of examples of this kind of what we refer to as the real sharing economy. You know, a sharing economy that's focused more on the personal transformation over just the transaction. You know, Desmond Tutu says a person is a person through other persons. That interaction is really where that transformation takes place. And as we're facing this incredible health crisis that we're still trying to understand around social isolation and loneliness, this loneliness epidemic that's really happening all over the world. The EU is investing lots of money in studying it and trying to figure out various different projects to try and mitigate it. The US has not spent as much money on it quite yet, but I think it really will. A lot of that is that lack of connection, and these projects, while they are wonderful on their own and in the kind of the direct purpose that they're serving, it's that interpersonal connection which is formed through these various examples. I think that has really the greatest benefit to our communities, because that work can really ripple. And that's kind of where we like to talk about the sharing transformation, where that really occurs and how that really supports ourselves as individuals, but also really our communities. And so it really comes down to that solution is us. That solution is, we have the ability to engage our communities in this way, to support these initiatives. A really wonderful example that I just want to leave you on is the idea of time banks. And there's now time banks all over the world. And they are wonderful because so many people are opting in to help. They're opting in to help their neighbors. They want to provide a service in some way. They want to be in service to their community. And the way they work is that, people basically are trading time. It's not a direct one-to-one barter exchange. It's just like a bank where somebody, puts in time hours, credits by helping others. And also like a bank, when somebody else helps you, you pay a credit out. And so your balance goes back and forth between negative and positive. And across the board, the biggest failing of time banks, whether they're small with a couple of hundred members or even scaling all the way up to the city of Istanbul, which has 40,000 members that are participating, 40,000 members that have opted in to help their neighbors. The biggest issue is that people aren't asking for help. And so even with the time bank with 40,000 members, like in Istanbul, they only have a couple hundred transactions every week because people aren't asking for help. So all these people but at the same time, all these people have opted in to help. And so it shows me that, one, there is a desire in our communities, whether there's a platform or not, to help one another. And two, it shows that this responsibility is on the time banks or on our community organizations to engage our community members to participate. That time bank in Istanbul with 40,000 members, it's the onus is on them to ask to make those connections between the various projects in the community, those community needs, and those community members that have opted in to help. And so, we, with this knowledge, I fall back to the old Spider-Man adage, with great power comes great responsibility, and creating these platforms, having this knowledge, around what's needed, and also building the list of people that want to help, that there's a responsibility to make those connections and to do that work. Mm-hmm. So I thank you for listening, and again, I'll just point you to our website at shareable.net. You can contact me. I'm Tom at shareable.net, and follow me on Twitter at shareabletom. And you can get the free PDF of the book at sharingcities.net. And again, I'm going to be creating a list of resources around our book and our how-tos. We've got, like I said, we've got about 100 different how-tos. The how to do a map jam, the share fests, all that stuff, and I'll put a package that can go out, and I'll be available as well if you have questions and need help moving forward.
Great.
So we're right at 11:30.
Yeah, we are amazing.
Any time for Q&A.
I don't. Yeah, not a lot of time. Chris, Tanya, I'm wondering. I'm going to call on you. Like, she does a lot of policy work and is pretty engaged with community. And I'm wondering, any reflections, anything that strikes you about this?
First of all, I've been loving this. So thank you, Tom, and thank you, Sue, and everyone else. I just spent a week in Mondragon learning about cooperativism and all the rest of it. So it's very relevant for me. But I think what it reinforces is that oftentimes when we think about policy change, we usually think about the legislature and changing laws. And I think oftentimes we can forget that systems and environments and small p policy change is really important. And so the small steps we can take to engage community members, to open up our processes, to invest in those around us and share our resources, all of that is policy change. All of that contributes to more equitable systems and environments. And so I really appreciate this. I think it really speaks to the core of, I think, how we are trying to expand and broaden the heart of what we really mean when we talk about, policy changes and what that can look like.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Yeah, and I think, the other thing I think you at the end, Tom, we're just talking about social isolation. And I think, what really speaks to me is just the cohesion that comes out of this, and how I don't know that we always think about that as a health intervention, but it really is, right? And so it's, so I think it's just exciting, and, I want to do more, and I'm hoping, that we can figure out ways to really take the stories, right, and expand on them. So and just in closing, any other comments, reflections on anybody else before we close? I know we're a little bit over, and Tom's got to get on a plane. So any other comments at all? Okay, well, thank you. I'm very, very grateful for your time today.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you again for having me, and I definitely get in contact with me.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, goodbye, everybody.